were all there, and there was a whole bunch of us. And I looked down the driveway, and I go, oh, there's my friend Wes. He's coming down the driveway. And then he had a girl with him, and then to the right of her, there was this guy. And it was very weird because I was like, I think his name is Brandon.
Hey Islanders, and welcome to episode 79 of the Camano Voice. Today I get to interview a mother of four, my business partner, and my wife. Please welcome Brittany Ericson.
Hi, I'm Brandon Ericson, and you're listening to the Camano Voice podcast, where I interview folks around Camano Island and beyond. If you want to stay up to date on events, businesses, and even hear a little history of this area, subscribe to this podcast and share with your friends. Thanks for listening.
Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice, where we release a new episode every Tuesday. On this episode, I get to interview my wife. I finally get to get her on the podcast for a full interview instead of just a short little thing that we did a while back. So anyways, I've been looking forward to this podcast for quite a while, and because it's my wife, and we got into a long conversation. This is going to be broken up into two pieces, so two parts, part one and part two. So this is going to be part one, and that's basically going to take us through the beginning part of Brittany's life and then all the way to when we got married. So you come back next week to finish that out. But I've been looking forward to this podcast for a while because my wife has just been my rock. She's amazing with our four kiddos. She is so kind and compassionate and empathetic to other people, and really allows me to do what I do within my business, within everything. And she's also very good, for me to, when we talk about things within the business and stuff. We're able to talk about, bounce ideas off each other, and, she's very good at thinking through these things too. So sometimes I'll get excited about an idea and be like, we should do this. And she'll be like, well, we should, what about this, and this? And we don't do that idea because it was a dumb idea. So she is, she's just really awesome. And so I'm super excited to be able to do that. Before we jump into the episode real quick, I did want to just remind everyone, if you have any things, comments, questions, guest suggestions, send it to voice@camanocommons.com. I'd love to hear from you guys, see how you're liking the podcast. And but without further ado, here's my conversation with Brittany Ericson. Hey Islanders, and welcome to another episode of the Camano Voice. Today I'm here with my amazing wife, business partner, and mother of four. Welcome to the podcast, Brittany Ericson.
Hello.
Hi. All right. So before we get started, tell us a little bit about Brittany.
I'm your wife.
Yeah.
And the co-owner of Camano Island, or Camano Commons Marketplace.
All right. Editing already. No, keep going.
I grew up in Sedro-Woolley for the most part. Born in Seattle, and Bothell moved out to Sedro-Woolley when I was 6.5. And met you at the very young age of 18. You swept me off my feet by following me around and not taking no for an answer. And we got married when we were babies at 20, and it's been a whirlwind since then. I like reading, and I like cooking, and I love living in the Pacific Northwest, except in January. In January, I always question why we live here. But the other 11 months out of the year, I love it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. And I benefit greatly from the love of cooking part, so really glad about that one. All right. So you said you grew up in Seattle, or not grew up in Seattle, you grew up in Sedro-Woolley, but you said you were first in Seattle. So what do you remember much of, it's pretty young, but do you remember much from being in Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, well, I was born in Seattle, and then until I was 6.5, we lived in Bothell, which is just north of Seattle. And I remember a lot about that house. That was the house that I lived in I come from a large family that is very spread apart. There's a 20 plus year age difference between the youngest and oldest. So my parents I have a bunch of older siblings, and then I was a bit of a like, oops. And so my next oldest sister is 11 years older than me, but Bothell is where I remember my four older siblings at various points living with them, and they were all pretty much teenagers or in their early 20s when we were there. And then when we moved out to Siegel when I was 6.5, it was just my next oldest sister that moved out there with us. And she graduated and left soon afterwards. And then it was just me and my parents for about a year until another surprise came along when my mother was 45. She had my last sister, who is, a little over, 8.5 years younger than me. So that was a shock to me because my whole 8.5 years, I had asked my parents for a younger sibling and they said, not possible. So the story is when they took me out and said, well, first they asked me, guess what? Guess what we're having, or some question along those lines. And I said, a pony? They said, no, a sister or a little baby sibling. And I said, how? Because I didn't think it was possible. And then my little sister burst on my life and our lives. And I grew up we had a farm that was just under 3 acres. My dad was a contractor and my mom stayed at home. But I can't say that she didn't work because we had animals and we had a very large garden, and my mom my parents raised all of the food we ate pretty much. So it was pretty great living. We lived 5 miles east of Siegel, and it was a beautiful old farmhouse and beautiful land with an old orchard. And the childhood memories are pretty heavenly. Traipsing around the forest, exploring the creek. We lived near the Skagit River, but not in the flood zone. So it was pretty great.
Nice. Well, and so I mean, we just passed 2020. This is my first podcast of 2021. First one recorded during, and I think nobody now questions what stay-at-home moms do during the day.
Yeah.
But so when you moved from Seattle to Cedar Woolley, like you said, I know you were really young, but what was that like? Was it something that you were really excited about? Were you really sad about leaving the city?
Yeah, I mean, so in the city, I had my two very close friends that I just adored, Anne and Amy, and both of their parents are like good friends with my family, and so they would still come up and visit. But yeah, it was definitely oh gosh, my friends are gone, and our church, we, left churches and went to a much smaller church. And it was a big difference. The one thing that was great though is when you are 6.5 and you move 5 miles east of Cedar Woolley in 1995, most of my neighbors had never even been to Seattle or Bothell. I'm from Bothell, which just have to make that difference, because if I say I'm from Bothell and then you keep saying I'm from Seattle, people in Seattle will be like, no, it's not the same. Or people from Bothell. So anyways, but when you are 6.5, 7, 8, and they knew that you came from the big city and that you had been to Seattle and that you had, friends in Seattle that you would visit, I was pretty hot stuff in the neighborhood. It was like, wow, you've seen the Space Needle. And I had been up in the Space Needle. I had been to Pike Place Market. And we also, my parents, before I was born and after I was born for a little while, but they had a lot of international exchange students that lived with them. And so I had met people from other cultures, and my mom knew how to cook from all different places. And I had been to all different, just had a variety of cuisines. So I was a pretty a klutzy, tomboyish kid, and so I wasn't very skilled at sports or anything, but I had been to Seattle, so that was bragging rights forever.
Nice.
Yes.
Cool. So then once you moved out there, what was it like for you? Because that's just so drastically different. What was that like for you to move to like a farm and be way out there? And yeah.
You calling me a redneck?
No.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, I was young enough that it wasn't, I mean, we got chickens and we had cats and yeah, I don't know. We just had like animals and I think if I had been a little older, I probably would have been like, oh, scary. But I think I pretty much adapted to it pretty quickly. There was one scary thing is when we moved into the farmhouse, it had original windows in it and it had been built. I think the first record of it is like 1902. So it's old. And it was on the original studs. So it wasn't a foundation. It was on these posts. And when it got windy, it would sway. And then it had the original windows, which were like wooden frames, single pane glass. And you could feel the wind come through them and they would rattle. And then we had a corkscrew willow tree and it would, outside my window. And it would throw shadows on the wall. And so that was very spooky. And then we had attics off of every room. We had these attics in the eaves of the house. And I was very into Chronicles of Narnia and in The Magician's Nephew. There's a story about Jill and, no, not Jill. I forget the characters, but they were in the eaves of the attic. And so I would play all sorts of games and then occasionally creep myself out. And then the other thing is there was like birds would get into the side of our, like in our insulation, or there wasn't even insulation, but they would get in there, or rats or something. And so you'd hear them like skittering in the walls. And so that's the only thing I remember. And the first time I heard cows, because I mean, cows go moo. We all know that. But cows can also make terrifying sounds. And we were surrounded by dairy farms. So yeah, no, there was a couple things that I was just like, what is this? But then, yeah, I mean, I got in with the group of like neighborhood kids and if I brought anything up like that, they'd just laugh me out. So I kept my mouth closed and learned it was pretty normal. But yeah, no, I mean, I really loved we were surrounded by farms, and so you would get to go see all sorts of animals being born. I remember seeing a calf being born within like the first year, and then I remember watching a pig give birth to piglets, and they just kind of shoot them out. Like it was, I just remember watching it and being like, "What is happening?" So yeah, I got to see all sorts of stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, yes, the lake culture is different, like Sijuwali to Seattle, I'm sure, but yeah, it was, yes, people make fun of Sijuwali, but it really, there's just a lot of lovely people. And even though all of us neighbors were spread out, we all had a huge, like you come together if anything happens and you all know each other even more so than in the city, I think, because you have to know each other to get through anything.
Right.
So yeah, and there was one of the farmers nearby. His name was actually, like, we called him Farmer. That was his name. So, but yeah, no, I really, really, really loved that experience growing up on the farm.
Nice. So then, were you going to school? Like, were you being homeschooled? Did you go to
No, yeah, I
Sijuwali?
was homeschooled all the way through. And yeah, my mom schooled us at home. My mom, she has homeschooled for years and years. My other siblings went to school and did homeschooling, but my mom homeschooled in the 70s, like in some places when it probably was still illegal. And my mom is a very avid reader and very intelligent woman. And so we did some curriculums, like we did all the things, but she was very much into what they would nowadays call like child-led learning, but not unschooling. Very similar to like the Charlotte Mason method, if any homeschoolers are listening out there. We read a lot And my mom loves to learn, and she definitely passed that on to us. I remember as a homeschooler growing up, sometimes it was like, oh, I feel like I'm missing things, or, am I sure I'm checking all the boxes? But I now see it just that she definitely instilled in all of her children just the love of learning and the ability to know that we can learn anything that we don't know. We can go out and learn it. And, that's where I get my love of reading. And then my dad was a contractor, and we would go on the job with him and get to see how houses were built. So geometry. I remember learning geometry. I was like, oh, it totally makes sense. It's building houses. And then algebra is the subject that I just failed miserably at, because it just did not make sense. Geometry, you can do stuff with it. Algebra, I still to this day, I'm like, what? Yeah, I know. And then I married you, who's a mechanical engineer. If anybody doesn't know, he got his bachelor's in mechanical engineering. So he understands algebra. So I will send all the kids to him, and maybe I'll learn algebra from you someday.
Someday. Very cool. So then, so you were homeschooled all the way through high school. What did you do after high school then?
Yeah, the last 2 years of high school, I did do running start at Skagit Valley College, and I loved that. The advisors really want you to get a degree or like an AA, work towards that. And I sort of did. I did a lot of music classes. I took some Spanish. I took some speech, and I did computers. I kind of just, I at that point, like, they wanted me to go towards a certain goal of getting an AA, but I kind of wanted to fill in the cracks of things that maybe were harder to be taught at home. And it was honestly, also, it was a time in my life that I had growing up out in the country. You are isolated. As a child, I wasn't so much, but, my teen years, especially prior, like 14, 15, I was pretty isolated. And so it was like a party going to running start. There were friends, and I got very into swing dancing. And, I had an older sister in Seattle at the time who had an apartment, and, I guess that was more when I was like 18, trying to think when she got the apartment, but she would take us, we could go swing dancing with her. And, it was really fun, and we had a really fun group of people. And it's interesting. So I went to Running Start, and Eli and Wes were there, who were two of your friends that you grew up with. So I actually became friends with a lot of Brandon's friends before I met Brandon. Well, not before I met you, because I met you when I was 12, but, it was funny because after we started dating, we would go places. You'd be like, oh, do you know so-and-so or so-and-so? And I did. Like, we kind of were like, wait, how had we not met earlier? Because we had a lot of the same, not like friends, but like acquaintances. We were in very similar circles, being both homeschooled and Christians. And,
So. Very cool. And you might have mentioned this, but when you were at the Running Start, then did you have any sort of focus that you were kind of, as far as class and stuff like that, or just kind of?
No, I mean, I had taken flute since I was 10 years old, and I had considered, I really liked music and learning about it, but I started having issues with like carpal tunnel, and like now we know I also probably have rheumatoid arthritis, but I had something, and it was like I felt basically the more I practiced, the slower my fingers seemed to move. And so I had considered going to college, getting a music degree, but that didn't seem like the smartest thing to do, just because I wasn't sure how to monetize it, I guess, afterwards.
Yeah. And
then also I would have to learn an entirely new instrument if the flute wasn't working out, and I didn't want to do that. There was a brief stint where I wanted to become a conductor. No. So no, not really. I mean, I had my best friend and I at the time. When I went to Running Start, I ended up, the first class was Spanish, and I ended up going in the room, and there was only one seat left, and it was next to Emily Harmon Waterloo, who is now works for us, and but her and I have just been, ever since that day that we sat down next to each other, we were just very tight, and we both adore musical theater and love reading books, and so we just completely clicked. And so there was she went on to get her theater degree, and I definitely was like, ooh, that would be fun. But I've always been somebody, so when I was 15, I started working at Skagit River Ranch, which was right down the road from where I grew up, and it had they raised pasture raised organic pork, beef, chicken, turkeys, and they had been great family friends. We went to church together. Loved working there. Very hard to work there, but taught me really great work ethic. And I got to do farmers markets down in Seattle, which is probably still to this day one of the best. I love working any sort of farmers market for any company, but loved working for them. And there was a point where I was like, oh, maybe I'll be a butcher. That does seem, which I know grosses some people out. And then, during those years in Running Start, I also worked for a chiropractor in Cedar Woolley. I worked very briefly at Joy's Bakery and Cafe in Cedar Woolley. And if they ever hear this, I'm so sorry. I was the worst waitress ever. It was comical. I just remember people ordering a sandwich and being like, great, writing it down and going to turn it into the cook. And they were like, what type of bread? And I'd go back to the table. So what type of bread on the sandwich? Wheat. And going back. Okay, wheat. What type of cheese? And I'd be like, I'd go back and I'd ask them. And then I'd get to cook and he'd be like, what do they want? Fries? Do they want salad? What kind of meat do they want? I remember going back to this one table 5 times. The people were so annoyed. And that was a side job. I also worked at Thompson's Greenhouse in Cedar Woolley. Loved working there in a greenhouse. Is probably the most soothing job you can ever have. Just watering plants and deadheading them and learning a lot of different plant names. And it's very peaceful, and the customers, anybody who comes to shop at a greenhouse and nursery, I would say is just a lovely person. So I had, that was a fun job. I at one point I had 3 jobs at one point. So
okay.
I, would kind of overlap. And I'm trying to think if I'm forgetting any jobs. I did some farmers markets for different people.
Well, and I think I want to touch back on something that you mentioned. You said with Skagit Skagit Ranch, you were, you had to, it was a really difficult job and something that you had to, you were really pushed to work hard and stay on top of things. So you learned a work ethic at a young age, and then you went on to the chiropractor, and that, you're like, yes, I know how to do this. I can work hard, and then you get to this other type of job that it didn't matter how hard you worked or focused or what, it just wasn't fitting. And I think that is something, with the marketplace, stuff like that, we run into that where there's people that are they're great workers, they're hard workers, but it just doesn't work. And I think it's not against them or us. It's just some people, there's certain types of jobs that people do better in.
Yeah, sometimes it just doesn't fit. And as a teenager, I was very hard on myself, which now I was just oh man, not everybody's cut out to be a waitress. And I will say, I'm glad I did that job because I have never looked down on waitresses. I am completely in awe of waitresses in general, especially sometimes you go to a restaurant and they don't even write it down. And I'm like, I don't even, my older sister, I think, and my older brother, and all my older siblings have been waitresses or waiters, and I don't know how they do it. I could probably do it better now, having since stayed at home with 4 children who ask you a million questions a day, and so learned to stay a little bit more focused. But at 17, I was terrible. And if you ever went to Joy's Bakery and Cafe in 2000, I don't know, 5 or something. I'm so sorry if you ever got me. But yeah, and yeah, they were lovely, and people should go there. They have the best donuts. They have delicious food. Yeah. Oh, and I mean, yeah, one thing I hadn't mentioned too is I've always been like a bit of an entrepreneurial type. When I was 12 and 13, my friend Kelia and I, she was down the road from me. She and I did this, like, I don't know what you want to say. Like, we made like salves and balms. We did like deodorant. We made all this stuff out of herbs from the garden and natural ingredients, and we would go sell it at the Cedroli Farmers Market. And that's we made lavender lemonade and would sell it. And that was where my love for farmers markets first came into play, just as far as like, it's just lovely, the people you meet there and the conversations you have. And it was also a great opportunity for me at like 13 to feel like a grown up, and you learn how to make change for money. And yeah, that was a blast. And our mothers, God bless them, Anita and my mom, they definitely put up with us making all sorts of concoctions in their kitchens, probably ruining some of their pans, and taking us to buy containers. And yeah, that was a great experience.
Nice.
That was when I was 13.
Yeah, I kind of did the same thing as far as making things. I decided that I was going to make a little market in our house because I wanted to make some money. So I got a bunch of... I have not
heard this.
I got a bunch of construction paper, and I cut it up, and I turned it into art, my version of art at the time, and taped it together. And I laid it all out on our fireplace at our house. And on one end, you had the 10 cents art, but on the other end, you had the $100 art. And I laid it all out, and I went and got my mom and dad and said, did a bunch of art and stuff, and I'm selling it to you guys. And I was very disappointed. I think the most they bought were some of the 25-cent piece, which, looking back, they were very generous to give me the 25 cents piece.
I feel like your father may not have bought some. I feel like your mother probably was like, oh, this is so lovely. Like,
no, my dad bought some.
Your dad bought some?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, not...
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I made like $1.50 out of that whole thing.
Watch out, Jed Dorsey. He's coming for you. Apparently, I'm married to an artist. I had no idea.
I'll be touring this year.
That's where our kids get it from.
Yes.
Our kids go through reams of paper. They're ridiculous.
Yes.
And tape.
Okay, so then after you were working these other jobs, where'd you go from there? What was kind of your next step?
Well, when I was 17, I wasn't quite sure what order it was going to go in, but I was going to go to a discipleship training program when I was 18. And then I was going to go to Darjeeling, India, where my parents had friends that ran a school for its... oh my goodness. I'm sorry, guys. It's late at night, and I can't quite remember. To teach like skill training. They just taught them how, and it was a pretty like self-sufficient school that had a farm and all that. And I wanted to go out there, at least for a few years, and kind of find out, like, I didn't want to jump right into college. I kind of wanted to think about more seriously what I wanted to do. And then I planned on, coming back and then getting more training or going to college for whatever I needed. And then moving back to India or wherever. I was a homeschooled girl, Christian, and I grew up, and a lot of my friends wanted to get married young. And I mean, obviously I had crushes on lots of boys, but like at 17, I was kind of like, oh, I don't know. I'm not going to just get married young and have kids. Like, I don't even know if I will get married. There's a lot of world out there, and I'm just going to go see it all. And then I had a bit of a traumatic event happen right before I turned 18 and kind of shook me up even a little bit more. And so I was even more so just like yeah, nope. I want to just get out and see the world, but do something to help people. And I've always been I did an herbalist course when I was a teenager, and so I've always been very interested in herbs and plants, and I wanted to get to know more about herbs and plants in other countries. And I was about to turn 18, and I got invited to a friend's graduation party, and we were all there, and there was a whole bunch of us. And I looked down the driveway, and I go, "Oh, there's my friend Wes. He's coming down the driveway." And then he had a girl with him, and then to the right of her, there was this guy. And it was very weird because I was like, I think his name is Brandon, but like, how do I know him? And then what was even weirder is my friends and I are sitting, we're talking the rocks, and I hear this guy asking people behind me, "Is that girl's name Brittany? Or what's her name?" Or he was asking about me, and I was like, well, that's weird. And I don't know if we talked or if it was later on there was swing dancing and you came up and you were like, because spoiler alert, the guy was Brandon. So stay tuned to find out what happened with that relationship. But this guy comes up and asks me to dance, or do you know how to dance? And I said, yes, or the particular dance. I don't think I did know how to, the cha-cha. So you taught me, and then we were dancing. And I thought he was pretty cute. But I wasn't like super interested in boys. I just was going to dance with him. And then we kind of talked on and off. And later in the evening, we were all sitting around a bonfire. And and Brandon turns to me, and he has a little notebook that he pulls out of his pocket, which if any of you knew Brandon when he was younger, he had a lot of things in his pockets. He had everything in his pockets at all times. So he pulls a planner out of his pocket and a pen and says, "Hey, wow, you like dancing and I like dancing. A bunch of us, just like friends, a group of friends, we go dancing on Thursdays at the Cedar Grange sometimes." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And he's like, "Can I, maybe put down your like name and number and email just for inviting you to dancing?" And I had a friend across the fire, Ravi, who just kind of yells out across the fire rather loudly, "Oh, are you inviting everyone?" And Brandon, not wanting to admit he might like me, said, "Oh, yeah, of course, pass it around." So Brandon passed around his planner and pen around the fire, and I don't know how many, there was over 10 people around that fire, got all these names and emails.
Yep.
And I thought it was funny. We all thought it was kind of funny. And my friend Emily was there. She got her name and email, and the next day, before I'd even woken up the next day, I'd like check my email, and there's an email from him. And I think the first one was kind of like, "Oh, me and my friends are gonna go play pool in Stanwood. Want to join us?" And I was like, "No, And
I don't know why.
I was like, "Who is this?" And I'm in Cedar Woolley, and that's Stanwood. So here's the thing: please don't knock on Cedar Woolley too much. We deserve it a lot. They deserve it a lot. But it is a long drive to Stanwood or to Camano Island. And then the next day, he sends me another email. There was one day where you sent me 2 emails. You invited me to your youth group. You invited me to go play games. You invited me to go dancing. And I forgot what had come up, but all of a sudden my parents were like, "No, we don't want you dancing at the Grange until you're 18. And I was turning 18 in like 2 weeks. But I didn't want to admit that. And so anyways, he sends me, in the space of 1 week, sends me 6 emails. And I see my friend Emily, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what is up with this guy? He's sending us so many emails." And she was like, "Well, what do you mean so many emails?" She's like, "I just got the one to dancing."
Busted.
Busted. Yeah. So, yeah. So, I don't need to tell the entire story. Most people have heard it, but the reason why I knew his name and why he knew my name was when we were 12, we were at Warm Beach camp, and he had a crush on me then. And then when we were 15, we had bumped into each other again.
Still had a crush.
Still had a crush at that point. And actually, when we were 15, it was really fun. Well, at the camp, it was funny because he wouldn't talk to me, and but he had a disposable camera, and he tried to get all of his friends to take pictures of me and my friends because we were 12, and they would form a shield around me and wouldn't let him get pictures. The last day of camp, this is funny. If anybody knows Carolyn Lowe, who has since gone, passed away, but she was coming to pick Brandon and his friends up. And she comes up to me and she says, "Can I get a picture of you?" And I said, "No." And she took a picture anyways. And Brandon still has that picture. Not creepy at all.
Aww.
And then when we were 15, I do remember we went on this field trip together, and I remember randomly turning around, and he would be behind me or near me, but could not. I'd be like, "Hi," and he would be trying so hard to talk and could not, was just be terrified of talking to girls.
They're very scary.
Very scary.
I had traumatic experiences too with girls.
Yeah. So he pursued me well into September. That was when we met beginning of June, and end of September, he finally got up the nerve to ask me out.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Yeah. But while we were dating, what happened? So we started dating in September.
So just because I was dating you, I was not about, I was very spiritual. I was not about to give up on my discipleship training program. Because God is greater than a boyfriend. So I went to the training program in January of that year after we started dating in September. And we had 6-7 months that we were apart, long distance. I went down to Bend, Oregon, and did the training program. And that was rough. Long distance relationships are very, very rough.
Mm-hmm.
And we were so sweet and naive. We had started dating, and we had a 5-year plan because Brandon had to finish college, which was going to take 5 years at that point.
Yep.
So I was going to do the training program, and then I was still going to go to India and all that. But somewhere in the training program, we decided, we want to get married. But we were 18. And Brandon's dad had said, "No, you need to finish college." Brandon was going to Everett Community College at that time, and it was going to take 3 years to get your undergrad or your associate's degree.
Yeah. The transfer degree.
Transfer degree for mechanical engineering, which mechanical engineering is a degree that a lot of times does take 5 years. We do some people that take longer.
Yep.
It's a hard degree. And so I just said, "Hey, well, what if you ask him when you're done with Everett?" And so Brandon's parents were like, "Yeah, once you're done with Everett," thinking it was 3 years off. And then we discussed, how about you talk to your advisor and see if you can finish it in 2 years so that you're done in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, okay. And so he moved stuff around. And so summer of 2008 was like, I'm going to propose to her. So I got back summer of 2008. We'd started dating September 2007. And then you proposed end of October 2008. And we got married June 27th, 2009. Right in the, if you've been to Camano Commons Marketplace, when you go out the back, there's the green area there in Camano Commons, and that is where Brandon and I got married with 300 plus guests in 2009.
Yeah,
so.
Very different little area because there was some of the things that are there now weren't, and then there were totally
there
different
were trees.
restaurants and
the crab
things.
wasn't there.
Yeah, so it looked a little different, but
none of the outside restaurant places were there, so we had a lot bigger of a courtyard, and we put up tents. And
there was a restaurant there that my dad had started, which he had sold later on, but that was called Islanders. That they
was Islanders still there? Yeah.
Yep, because that's where we did our rehearsal dinner at.
Okay. And we did dancing over.
Yep.
If anybody has seen the large, checkered chessboard, basically in the courtyard, which
with no chess pieces.
Yeah, with no chess pieces. That's where we danced. And the marketplace was Brindle's at the time.
Yeah.
And Brandon would always talk about Brindle's. He just thought it was the cutest place. And like, I don't know, he liked like little shops. And when we went on our honeymoon, we went to the Oregon coast and Cannon Beach, and definitely I hadn't grown up like going to like like when we did vacations, it was like camping. We didn't really like go into touristy towns that much. And so I got this whole other experience. Brandon would take me into all these like fun little shops that he remembers going to as a kid. And there's definitely, you can see why we own the marketplace, because there's definitely just this love of like small little shops that are just like, you know, eclectic, got a lot of things in them. Not just like not just a gift shop or just an espresso stand, but like has all the things.
Yeah. Well, big thank you to Brittany for joining me on the podcast today, and thank you for listening. Remember to come back next week for part 2 of my interview with my wife, Brittany Ericson.